So guys, we will basically in this session we will see uh, like base why system design interviews, what's the rationale behind it, why companies like favor asking it. We will see a step by step, very structured approach about answering system design questions in the interview, and after that we will like see design of one or two systems as the time permits. So let's move ahead. So yeah, so guys, first thing is why system design interviews. So guys, what's the main rationale behind like interviewing the candidates on the system design? I think my internet connection is slow. I turn off the video so that there is no lag. I am seeing the unstable connection level. Yeah. So guys, first we will discuss what's the key rationale behind like system design interviews and why do companies favor asking it a lot. So first thing, it tells basically interviewer about overall how are you as a person. When if you get hired and you come on board in the company, then how will you act when you are forced to design a system in real world? How will you act? How will you think? What are the dimensions of a problem that you will be considering while designing the system? And how basically not just planning, how are you going to execute the entire thing? So to get idea about all of these things, companies ask system design interviews. Another thing is that basically, so companies want to if they are hiring you, so they want every company wants good engineers. So good engineers in terms of what are the parameters for that. So companies want to see how good problem solver you are, how basically how whether you are a long term thinker or you are a short term thinker. So if now then you also have need to have a very broad mindset while you are solving the problem. So for example, say if I ask you to design a certain system, say chat application. So chat application. So you cannot just go alone in the room and design the system and come back, right? First, lot of discussions have to happen with your colleagues, with people around you, your manager, and all of those things. And so that's kind of discussion. So system design interviews are nothing more than that. You are just presented with a problem. You are assigned a problem. You have to come up with a solution for it. You have to discuss it with your managers, your teams, and see what are the trade-offs, what are the shortcomings of a particular solution, and how are you going to cope up with them. So basically it's they get an idea about long-term thinking, then scalability aspect of it. Basically if you are given a system, you cannot just think whether a short that a system will be used by 100 users or 200 users or 500 users. You have to keep in mind your system, whichever system you design, it should be such that the system is very much extensible. It's easy for you to accommodate more users in the system. If your traffic goes, your outreach grows among the people. So basically companies want to judge you on all of these things. Another thing is basically how futuristic you are. So say you are given with a problem. Now you cannot, you just don't have to solve it. You have to take all the dimensions into account. Whichever problem you solve, that has to be very much maintainable. It should be feasible from operational point of view. So for example, I'll tell you one scenario. So basically I had one mentee who just joined in my team couple of months back. So what he did was we were working on one problem which uses Redis as a caching layer. So what this guy did was he came up with the first solution in which he wanted to clean up of Redis every night. So now this approach has an operational effort. Everyone will have to go like some person has to manually clean up the Redis in night. So this was the first thing which he came up with, since he was not very much familiar with automation, cron jobs and all those things. So once I asked him to explore more, he just what another approach that he came up with, why not write a job who will clean the Redis automatically every night. So cleaning manually, this was the first thing. Another thing was automating it. Both of these things have some operational efforts. So I was not convinced with both of these things, since I of course knew the better solution and I wanted him to explore more. So the third thing he came up with after further exploration, of course I gave him some key points, is setting the TTL with Redis keys. So what does the TTL do? If you add a key in a Redis, say name equals to Alice, so you can set a TTL of this key to say 100 seconds. After 100 seconds, this key will automatically get removed from Redis and your space will become free. So now this this approach does not have any kind of operational effort in it. So if you are designing a system, you have to think from you have to think such that there are no operational efforts. You have to keep little broader picture in mind, and that's how you should think about basically your design should be futuristic in nature, both feasible in terms of operations and maintenance. So guys, these were like few points which we had discussed, which gives us idea about why companies are prefer asking system design interviews and what are the rationales behind it. So guys, you can feel free to discuss anything if you want in between, else I'll move ahead. So now once we are done with this thing, another thing that comes in is actually designing a system. So how do you go about it, and how do you answer exactly the system design questions in an interview? So whenever you are posed with system design question, so first thing that you have to do is understand the problem. This thing is very much underrated, I would say. So so for example, you may be asked to design a system which you are not familiar with. So for example, maybe you are asked to design some system for some card game, say like Judgment, Rummy, or like Bluffmaster, or any card game. And if you don't know rules of that game, then you will have a hard time designing a system, right? So it's very important for you to first understand the system. For example, if I say you design twitter.com or design facebook.com or design Instagram, all of you are very much familiar with this system. So you won't have any hurdle for this. But there may be a times when you are posed with a question, you are posed with a system that you are not familiar with, or you have no clue about. So in that case, your first responsibility is to understand the problem, make sure you have understood all the rules, and basically what are the things that are going to be in place. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Right, right. Yeah, 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 of course, of course. That's step 2, which is requirement clarification. So basically, whenever you are asked to design a system, you have to basically think of the features that comes to your mind and ask interviewer whether we are going to have these features or not. Now when you like start with these things, your main focus should be to start from the very basic and fundamental features. For example, someone has just given an example of Gmail. If you are designing a system for Gmail, then how you should go, you should first present the features, sending an email is the most fundamental feature if you are designing a Gmail, right? Or viewing the emails basically, or fetching up the emails is the most fundamental feature. Or creating a mailing list could be some another important feature. CC/BCC could be another thing that you would want to have. So make sure you start from most fundamental features first, and then you come to fancy features. So for example, if you have been asked to design twitter.com, then your questions could be whether basically this is question and answer. Requirement clarification part is you have to ask a lot of questions to the interviewer and settle up on certain requirement for the phase 1. And if some interviewers if time is left, some interviewers can later add some more features to it and can ask you to come up with the design for that too. But there are some set of features which you have to come on consensus with the interviewer and proceed to design them. So for example, if you have been asked to design Twitter, you can ask whether the tweets are going to be text or multimedia. Now whether you are going to give a functionality to follow, unfollow or not. Guys, you can also suggest something. If you have been asked to design twitter.com, what are all the questions that you will ask interviewer? Comments could be one thing. Yeah, comments basically they are replies and retweets, basically replies and retweets. Another thing, another thing could be trending text, could be likes. Anything else, guys? Notifications, whether someone you follow makes a tweet, then you should receive a notification, or the followers should receive notification. So guys, I think these are all. So they are just we are not agreeing upon it for now. We are just listing down them. We are not designing a system for now. We are just understanding the flow, how you have to approach the problem. So there could be a host of questions. The idea is to ask as many questions as possible with the interviewer and get a final set of features that you would be designing. Does it make sense, guys? Any questions on this? So we will move ahead. So third thing, after this, what you are going to do is you will basically identify the high level APIs that are going to be in your system. So for example, send tweet could be one API with some parameters, of course. Follow, then API to fetch some trending text. So all of these are not going to be into same service. We are not defining the scope of it as of now. We have to just identify the set of APIs that we will have to design. So guys, you will get more idea about this thing once we jump into actually designing a system. Now comes the next part, fourth one. Fourth item is basically estimation. So formally it is referred as back of the envelope estimation. So these estimations are not going to be exact, but this estimation is basically some sense which you need to have before you start to design up a system. So you have to what comes under it? First thing, expected scale, कि आपको कितने यूजर्स के लिए सिस्टम को बनाना है, ठीक है. फॉर एग्जांपल डिजाइनिंग twitter.com फॉर 1000 यूजर्स वर्सेस डिजाइनिंग like Twitter for 500 million users are totally different things, correct? So you have to basically like discuss with the interviewer, make some assumptions and agree on the scale that you are expecting. So guys, one point I would like to make here is that, so whenever you are working with consumer facing system, there are two terms which you will hear a lot. First is DAU, that is daily active users. And another one is total users. So both of these things are different. Daily active users means total हर दिन platform पे like how many people are coming on the platform every day, and total user is how many users you totally have in your system. So like expected scale, if you talk about, the interviewer can ask you, say there are total 500 million users, out of which 100 million users at least use the platform every day. So you can discuss this thing with interviewer. So before finalizing it, because in this system we are more familiar with these numbers, like Twitter's millions of users. There could be a system where like you may consider having a low number at start, but interviewer might not like that. So it's good to have some discussion with the interviewer before finalizing this thing. Another thing like in estimation that kicks in is storage. How much storage? This storage does not mean the data store that you are going to use. It's just a rough idea about the storage space that you will be needing. And another thing is network bandwidth. ठीक है. So now back of the envelope estimation we will see some math. You have to basically make some estimations. So for example, like say there are 100 million active users, and every day a user is on an average each user is making 5 tweets. 100 million total daily active users, 5 tweets every user basically is doing on the daily basis. What's the size of each tweet? Say 300 bytes. So now you have to come to some number, because network bandwidth, when you want to estimate, you will have to you have to come to some number which is of form Mbps or Gbps, right? Or storage, if you talk about, you need to like think in terms of MB, GBs, TBs or PBs, right? So you need to perform these calculations. So how we do that? Basically these are total number of data that's going to be written every day, right? So what you can do, you can divide this number, since we want this data at seconds level. So how do you convert this data to seconds quickly? So in one day the number of seconds are 24 hours, each hour has 60 minutes, 24 hours, each hour is 60 minutes, and each minute has 60 seconds. So if you do this multiplication, this number comes around 86,400. So this is roughly 100,000. So doing calculations with this number is like little bit trickier. So what we do, we round this off to 100,000. So we will divide it by 100,000 in order to get in order to find out network bandwidth, which is in terms of Mbps or Gbps. We are not going to do calculation now. We will do it when we actually solve the problem. Right now I am just explaining you the math that will quickly help us like calculate the estimations. Is this part clear to everyone? Yeah, writes per seconds. when you estimate the network bandwidth, there are two parts to it. One is network in and another one is network out. So this is network in. Yeah. Any other questions on this, guys? So we will move ahead. So this was another thing that we had in place. Now once we are done with the estimations, we will figure out data models. In this approach, in this step, you have to basically think what are going to be major like data items that you will have to store in your system, which is the database you will be using for it, and what are the fields that you are going to have in it. So first we can decide on the entities, and then we can think about the database that we will be using. So one thing that we have to use store for sure is user, right? For user, you can have some ID, phone, DOB, or email, and few other things if you want. So these are the information that you will have to store about the users. Another thing that you have got to store is tweets. You can assign one identifier to each of the tweet. Each tweet is going to have author ID, creation time, all of these things are basically the basic information that you are going to have for the tweet. What else? You can have you may have to store follow and follow right. So here you can have two things. Follower and following. Does it make sense, guys? So I think this is just we are taking for the example point of view, and if you feel like adding anything more, you can of course suggest. Yeah, basically in user model, in user table. No, basically the thing is that each user may be following, hundreds or millions of people, hundreds, thousands or millions of people, right? So then it will make each of the record of the user table very heavy. So that's the reason to separate it out. So guys, once this is done, next step is high level design. High level design, what exactly does this we have to do in this system? So basically so far we have identified the features that we are going to design. We have determined the network network bandwidth that we will be needing, storage we will be needing, representation of various data models. All of these things we have figured out. But how are you exactly going to serve that system? This thing is what we will be doing in high level design. For example, if user types in something and hits the tweet button, then what is going to happen under the hood? Or if user follows some another user, or if user unfollows another user, then what is it that you will have to do exactly? So all of these things comes under the high level design. Basically all of the use cases which you have identified, you have to walk interviewer through all of them in terms of their implementation details about how the data will flow in the system and how each of the use cases will be served. We will see this in more details once we actually start designing one system. So basically in high level design you have to how each of the will be served. So guys, I think this is the most important and critical part of the system design interviews. Like I have been consistently taking system design interviews of like lot many people. Basically, what's happening in the mistake that lot of people are doing, and that is what made me take this session. People see some random tutorial or random video on YouTube, just one video of 15-20 minutes, and they feel that like they are done for system design interview. They come up with some high level buzzwords and without having very detailed knowledge of it, and that's once just they start bouncing off those words, but at the end of the day, everything boils down to code. Everything boils down to how are you structure the flow of data in your system. How are you going to break the responsibilities? What component in the system is going to own what part of it? So this step is extremely important, and you should pay most of your attention to this step. Getting this right is what will fetch you medal in the system design interviews. So you should basically you don't have to talk any big things. You have to like stick to the ground, and just you have to be very rational about whatever you say. You don't have to use very high-fi words. You just have to design a system, like that's it. You have to place, at the end of the day, it all boils down to placing the components at the right places and breaking down the system into various components. So guys, I think these were major steps. One last step which we have is identifying and resolving bottlenecks. So guys, in last step, you have to go through your system once, identify what are the problems over there, suggest them to point them out to the interviewer, and come up with the solution for them. Guys, this step is also very important. Lot of people in interviews, in system design interviews, think that it's a bad idea to point out mistakes in your approach, mistakes in your design. But identifying mistakes in your design is actually a sign of a sign of actually a good software engineer. If you are yourself able to see the problems in your system, if you don't see them, then it's a problem. So there is nothing wrong in identifying problems in your systems. That actually makes interviewer happy. I literally like it when people first come up with the design, and then they point out like flaws in their system. On the other hand, there is a different category of people. What they do is they try to hide them up. They feel as if they are going to lose something if they just highlight mistakes or problems in their system. So guys, don't have this mindset. Have very agile mindset, very open for accepting flaws in your system, because there could be some things which you may miss, and interviewer will highlight them explicitly. So you have to admit like flaws in your system and propose relevant solutions for them. So guys, is this clear? Okay. So I hope we are going good so far. Anyone having any doubts or concerns? Okay, this one. So for example, once for example, you just go on the Twitter, right? First thing that you see is the timeline, the tweets, right? How the tweets are coming in. Basically, you are hitting some API and you are getting the tweets in the response. But there is a lot more happening at the back end. From engineering point of view, you have to take everything into the account. How are you storing the tweets? How are you computing the feed for all of the users? And basically, how are you, whenever a particular API is hit, what are the steps that you are doing at the back end in order to serve that API? So, so far we have seen this in theoretically only. Once we move to actually designing a system, we will see like practical aspect of it, and by then you will be having more clarity on it. So don't emphasize much on it for now. Just bear with me for a while. Yeah. Anything else, guys? ठीक है. So guys, we will start with one very simple system, which is URL shortener. So guys, you will see lot of text about designing URL shortener, lot of videos on it. I would say this problem is still very underrated, because a lot of people, what they do, they study URL shortener from some sources. They come in the interview and just they go on a different tangent altogether. But when you are designing a system in real world, तो वहाँ पे कोई हवा हवाई बातें नहीं होती, मतलब you have to basically come up with the solution that actually works, right? So designing a small systems correct is also a big deal. So so this problem, I would say, is very underestimated, because a lot of people still fail to get it correct in the system design interviews. So because the one simple reason is that everyone thinks it's very simple to design URL shortener, and no one actually designs it. So that's the fundamental problem with this. So now we will move to actual design of it. So guys, first thing, what are the problems that URL shortener solves? Why do we need URL shortener in first place? So guys, I want your inputs on this. हाँ. हाँ हाँ. Right, right. Yeah. So yeah. So I think this is one of the reason is shortening the text, या शॉर्टनिंग मैसेज साइज बोल सकते हो आप. ठीक है. इसका एक और लाइक देयर इज वन मोर डायमेंशन ऑफ इट अदर देन व्हाट लाइक द सजेशन दैट हैज जस्ट केम अप. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, यू वुड हैव सीन यू हैव टू सेंड मैसेजेस इन द मोबाइल, राइट? नाउ ऑन WhatsApp you don't have to pay anything, but when you are sending the text messages or the promotional messages to someone, when you are a business and you are sending that kind of messages, in that text messages, if the size of character exceeds particular character length, size of a message exceeds a particular length, then you have to pay for 2 messages. So each of the every character is crucial, so you can't just waste the characters. So in that case, you have to if you shorten up the URLs, you can save a lot more on the front of cost. So for example, you are Amazon.com, you have to send some promotional message to someone. Every day you would be selling hundreds of millions of messages, right? So even if you shorten the length, if you're shortening the length of the URL, because you would be essentially sending link to some products, right? Which could be very long, and if you send the shortened URL codes, then it's easy for us to save some cost on that. So I would say cost saving is another one. Third thing, anything else that comes to your mind? Link tracking. So for example, you are just creating, say, some link, or you have a video uploaded on Drive, or you have some file on the Drive, and you want a detailed analysis of it. So what you can do, like lot of URL shorteners offer this service. What you do, you can just create a shortened link for your actual link, and you can just share it with the people along, instead of sending the actual link. So now whenever people will click that link, all of the statistics URL shortener will track, and you can see them, like how many times the link has been clicked, what has been the hottest time when this link has been clicked. For example, you go and share your link on the Reddit, and you want to see how does the conversion comes from Reddit. That could be a proper use case, right? So or say you are running some marketing campaign, say you want to track app installs on, and you are sharing your links on Facebook. So how will you identify how much conversion you are getting from Facebook? The idea is to convert your actual shortening link to add your actual like install link to the shortened URL, and then you can just track the shortened URLs, the statistics of it. So guys, these are the major reasons why we need URL shortener. So trust me guys, a lot of people are there who don't who start designing URL shortener, but they don't know why is it URL shortener used for, and what are the some practical problems that URL shortener solves. So you should be aware of all of these things. So guys, now the second phase, second step that we have to perform is requirement clarification. What are the things that we are going to accommodate in our URL shortener? So guys, so one thing of course that we need is shortening, right? A big URL comes in and you have to return shortened code for it. So this is one functionality that we have to offer. Anything else guys? Yeah, so that's I would refer that as redirection. Basically a shortened URL is hit and you have to actually redirect to the actual URL. Anything else? Custom domain, right? Yeah, so custom domain, I am writing it down over here, but we won't take into the account in our design, because it's not the major problem that needs to be addressed in URL shortening. This is something simple. Uniqueness, so shortened URL should be unique, right? Yeah, I think that goes without saying. We undoubtedly need that, right? Because if you do, that's must, I would say that's must have in the system. URL should be unique, I would say. One thing, another thing that you can have is expiry. Say you want, say you are running some campaign for festival, say Holi. So you would want your link to get expired after say 29th of March. So expiry is one thing that you would want to have in URLs. So I think these are good enough features. So primarily we will be considering shortening, redirection, uniqueness, and expiry. So we will like skip the domain name. I'll just give a brief walkthrough of it. There's nothing much in it. So guys, anything else that you guys want to add over here, or you have in your mind? Okay. So guys, this was our, now we know what exactly we have to do. Before this we didn't know. Now comes important part, which is estimation. So now you have to identify basically the estimations that you are going to have in terms of storage, network, and overall estimation in terms of traffic. So guys, first thing, when it comes to estimating it, so how many URLs will be created per day or per month should be your first answer, first question. What's the basically the scale of creation of URLs that we are expecting? So say we have interviewer gives us 500 million URLs per month. So guys, you might be feeling this per month is little bit odd unit, but I am deliberately taking it because I want you to walk through, give you a walkthrough about how would you do exactly perform the calculations, and lot of interviewers also give it that way. So to figure out how exactly you will perform on that, and how you will make it to your final units of estimation that you want. So now this is the number of URLs. Another thing is traffic. So now when we talk about traffic, what we can do is now in the systems like URL shorteners, this kind of systems are read heavy systems. So for because if you create certain URL, you will be sharing it publicly. say you create a URL and you post it, go and post it into some Facebook group. That URL will be is going to have a lot more hits, right? So basically reads will be too many in terms of write. So we need to consider some ratio over here of read versus write. You may not need this in other systems, but I think for this kind of systems where we see a clear distinction between the number of reads and writes, it's important to consider this. So you can assume for every single URL created, it's going to be read 100 times. So for one write, there are going to be hundreds of reads at least. So this ratio also needs to be confirmed with the interviewer. This is just some ballpark number that I am choosing. It's totally fine even if you come with the 1:10 or 1:50 as a first step, and interviewer can then correct you. So it's totally fine. There is no math or no rocket science behind this number. So you don't have to bother much about it. So now we have to do basically we have to find out the QPS that we are going to have. Writes per second. So 500 million URL per month. 500 into 10⁶ for million divided by 30. This will give you 1 day, and if you divide it by basically like 10⁵ basically, so it will give you number for per second. So yeah, we can like move ahead with our estimation. So how are we going to do it? So this 10⁵ will cancel this will just become 10 basically. You can then again cancel out this thing, and you will cancel out this thing. So basically you are going to have 170 writes, 170 URLs per second. This is the rate of creation. Guys, does this make sense? So for simplicity we can also make it 200 URLs per second. So guys, this rounding off, I will call it margin of safety. So margin of safety, what does it mean? Ki you basically always take some part extra. You don't want to stay at a very borderline where you will just fall down. So you have to take some certain margin of safety. So that's why I have made it 200. If you don't make it 200, then also it's fine. But it's generally good because it will also give us some easiness in terms of calculations. Does it make sense, guys? Now this was the creation. Another thing is redirection, right? So since we have taken 1:100 ratio, we are going to have 20k hits, 20k per second, right? For like 20k hits per second on the shortened URLs. Does this make sense, guys? Now another thing that comes into the play is estimating the storage. So first we have estimated the traffic. Now we will estimate the storage, and then we will estimate the network bandwidth that we will be needing. So guys, like for estimating storage, we are creating basically 500 million URLs every month, right? And say we want to store the data for 1 year. So we will simply multiply it by 12, correct? So this is going to be 60 into 10⁹. 12 5 it will become 60. I think it will be 6 into 10⁹. Yeah, 6 into 10 raised to 9. So this is basically storage, 6 GB of storage that we will be needing. No, I think we are missing out on something. So yeah, byte size, yeah. So basically 6 billion URLs we are going to store. 6 billion URLs. Now we need to account for size of each URL. So we can assume we are going to consider 200 or 250 bytes, 200 or 250 character URL, which will essentially boil down to 500 bytes. So 1 character, 2 bytes. So if you want to make your allow URL of 200 to 250 bytes, 200 to 250 characters, then it will essentially be 500 bytes. So now if we do some multiplication, so 500 into 6, it's going to be 3000 into 10 raised to 9. So 3000, so it's essentially 3000 GB, which is 3 TB. Does it make sense, guys? So 3 TB is the amount of storage that we are going to need. Guys, any issues with this? ठीक. Now comes the another part, bandwidth estimation. So how do you estimate the bandwidth? So simple, this was the major part which we have done. So the network in, so we are going to create 200 URLs per second, and each URL is going to be 500 bytes long, correct? So this thing is going to be I think roughly around so I think it's going to be 100 KB per second. So 5 to the 10, and you are going to have 5 zeros. Yeah, so 100 kbps is the network in that you are going to need. For this is network for shorten API, right? Another thing is redirection. So it will just get multiplied by 100 basically, correct? So the number that we had essentially taken is 20k redirections per second. 20k redirections per second. So we will be doing 20k into 500, because that's basically 500 bytes is what is going to go out. So this number I think will come down to 500 into it's 1000 into 10 raised to 3. So I think it's 10 MB per second. This is the network bandwidth that we need for serving the redirection. Does this calculation make sense, guys? Guys, feel free to ask questions if you have any. Or I'll move ahead. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. No. So basically, the part why do we need network bandwidth estimation is that it gives you a rough amount on number of machines that you are going to need. So for example, if you use any cloud provider, for example AWS or Google Cloud provider, or like Azure or any cloud provider that you use. It provides you with the virtual machines, right? Now, each of the virtual machine, there are like a lot of categories of virtual machines. For example, on AWS there are machines of C4, M4, like A5. All these are categories of the machines which are available on AWS. So each machine has certain network bandwidth which it can support. So for example, I have this network bandwidth of say 10 Mbps, right? So now say if I choose say I use that T2 kind of machines that have network bandwidth of around I think 1 to 1.5 Mbps, then I am going to need 10 such machines. Now in this case, this is also the function of basically this alone is not going to give you like number of machines that you are going to need, because like one machine cannot the kind of traffic that we are going to have here, 20k URLs per second, that is the number of hits that we are going to get. So now basically that 10 machines may not be able to serve that. So 20k if you divide it by 20k and if you divide it, so it becomes 2k per second for machine. So this is a big number to support for a machine, but you get some rough sense of it. That's the whole point of doing the bandwidth estimation. Another thing is that in all of these cloud providers that you use, you have to pay for network bandwidth. Basically the ingress, they call it ingress. Ingress is basically the network in and network out. So you have to pay for that. So all of this information is going to help you while estimating the cost as well. Ki whichever system you are going to design, how much cost you will have to pay for it, because everything boils down to cost at the end, right? So these companies, AWS, Google Cloud, they charge you for network. So if you don't calculate the network bandwidth, then how are you going to estimate that? Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. 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 Right. Right. No, so basically how it will begin. So now basically this may not necessarily be the case in all the interviews, right? Say you skip this part in the interview. Now if interviewer comes up with a question how are you going to design, basically how are you going to estimate for the cost of the system? So that's when you will be needing this particular detail. So what you can do is you at least have to mention that you are aware of estimating it, because a good engineer will always think of the cost also when you are actually implementing it. So you can mention it depending on the interviewer's interest. You can choose to basically you can decide whether to estimate it that point of time, or interviewer can ask you to come back to it later. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. So now comes the next part, which is so just let me see on URL shortening. Yeah. So now we will do basically high level design. So guys, in URL shortener, we don't have much to model up. You just have to store some shortened code, and it's like original URL. So that's why I'm skipping that part, but we will discuss how we are going to actually use them in picture. So guys, now comes the part, now comes the thing that is really important, and the thing that interviewer is waiting for so long, which is how are you going to serve this request? Shorten some URL abc.xyz with some parameters, a equal to this, some URL you have gotten, a big random URL. How are you going to shorten this? Once this request comes to you, what are the next steps that you will perform? So guys, now I want your inputs on this. Yeah. Counters, right? By mean, so for example, like auto increment counters, right? Yeah. Another thing that you are you are mentioning is that what is that thing? Hashing. By hashing you mean hashing algorithms like SHA-2 or MD5, something like that? No, I think these hashing algorithms are collision free. I think MD5 has collisions, but I think SHA-2 is free of collisions. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we will come, we will basically see the exact reason why do we avoid like hashing in this case, or we should use it or not. But for now I think let's list down the approaches that we are having. So one is the counter, another is hash. Any other suggestions, guys? ठीक है. So guys, counter thing, what is the fundamental problem associated with the counter? Counters are guessable. So for example, if I give you some big URL and you assign me to first URL you give me 1, for second URL you give 2, for third URL you give 3. These counters are guessable. I can just increment and like invoke it, right? So this way, it's not considered to be a very good practice. If you're designing a system like URL shortener, your system should not be your URLs should not be guessable. That's the expectation, because this could lead to security issues. That depends on your purpose of designing URL shortener, but yeah, it can lead to security issues. It makes your system vulnerable basically. Now another thing is another suggestion that we have is SHA-2 or MD5. So the problem with this is that one reason is, of course, you can have collision if you use a poor hashing algorithm. Another problem with this is that if you use this hashing algorithm SHA-2 or MD5, the size basically the size of your shortened URL that you are going to get will be around 32 or 64 bytes long. So this is huge, right? These URLs would not be the shortened URLs anymore. You want some clean, some pretty shortened code basically. So that's the reason why we avoid. If you see any URL shortened for that matter, you will see like very clean and concise shortened codes. So if you create this big shortened codes, then it defeats the entire purpose of having URL shortener in first place. So guys, like both of these approaches have flaws. Any other suggestions that you guys have? Okay. So guys, another thing that is used is base 62 encoding. So in base 62 encoding, what we do, so for example, you would have seen a conversion of a number to a decimal number to hex, which is base 16, or octet, which is base 8. So similarly, we have base 62. So you generate a auto increment integer as suggested by someone, and then you take base 62 encoding of it. So base 62 encoding, what you do, 0 to 9, small a to z and capital A to z. So you basically encode this thing. You generate an integer and convert it to a base 62 number. So this thing is also, this thing I am just sharing it with you for your knowledge. This thing is also guessable. So now we don't have any approach left. So guys, how would you tackle this now? Uh-huh. Yeah. So guys, another approach that I would like to suggest you is, say if we keep we decide to keep our shortened code, say 8 characters long. So can't we generate a random string of 8 characters and use it? Yeah. Yeah. But how would you ensure the uniqueness? That's a fundamental question that we need to address. Yeah. So the problem is that you generate how can you handle uniqueness? What you do is you will generate a random code. You will check whether it has been already utilized or it's already there in DB or not. If that collides, you generate another one and then again check for it. Similarly, you go on. So this will make your slow down your shorten call basically. So this is not efficient approach. So guys, anything else? Okay. So now let me break down the suspense and share with you all how exactly we will be doing it. So guys, what we can do, we can have another system in place like key generation system. So now the approach which we have seen so far, what we are doing is we are generating a random string and we are checking it in the DB whether that collides or not. Another approach could be just just pre-computing some of the IDs and just use one of them. This could be the better approach. So what this key generation system will be doing is it will have some its own database and one cache. So ये क्या करेगा? What it will do? It will generate it will generate a shortened code. It will check whether it's there in DB or not, and it will basically put it into some queue, some basically in-memory data store like Redis, so that it can respond to it quickly. So now what we do, whenever there is a request for shortening a code, we call this key generation service, key generation system. It will respond to us back with one shortened code, and we will use that. And there will be no intelligence for generating a shortened code into our basically URL shortening service. So this way it will be much more faster, and also we have separated out the major concerns, because in this problem generating an identifier was also becoming a significant size problem. So that's why we have pulled that out of our main functionality, URL shortening service. Another benefit that we are getting with this approach is that, say tomorrow you want to use some another logic for key generation. So basically your service will remain abstract. You won't have to make any changes in your service, main shortening service. You will just have to change your key generation system, and rest of the things will keep working seamlessly. Guys, does this make sense? So this way, yeah, go on. Yeah. It also have its own persistent, and also there is one Redis for serving the request quickly. Otherwise you will not be able to find out what are some like unused IDs. Basically whenever this is your shorten service. Now whenever there is a request, you call KGS. Now this KGS needs to respond quickly with an ID, right? So it will maintain this unused identifiers in Redis, which it can just return in just milliseconds of time, single digit millisecond latency. Yeah, so for that we can have some like distributed SQL kind of database, distributed SQL storage we will be using. So shorten service will write to this. So some examples of it is one Google Cloud Spanner is a distributed SQL data store. So you can use distributed SQL. So guys, one quick question: why are we not using MongoDB or Cassandra for this? But so it was I think Karthik, right? So Karthik, you don't have to throw up a buzzword. Do we need ACID properties over here? Yeah, so undoubtedly, SQL store offers the ACID property, but the question is, do you need ACID property over here? We just have to make an insertion in DB. Come on. We just need durability aspect of it, which almost all the persistent data stores offer, right? So I think any other question? Sorry, any other reason why are we not using Mongo or Cassandra? Yeah. So basically, just there are 2 or 3 fields that we have to store, and we don't have to perform any kind of fancy queries based on the criteria, right? We just have to first insert them into the DB, and once there is a request for expanding up a URL, we just have to do a lookup on the ID. So both of these things distributed SQL offers nicely, and MongoDB we don't here need criteria based lookup, right? We don't have to store big lengthy JSON documents with lot of things. We don't have a need of we don't need basically schema-less thing over here. So there is no point of using these data stores. So that is the reason why we are using distributed SQL. So guys, this was I think pretty much it for the shortened URL. Another thing that you have to serve is the redirection URL. Any more questions on this thing? No, there is no disadvantage of it, but the question is, if you no, basically the thing is that if some simple pistol serves your purpose, why would you buy a machine gun? Yeah, so distributed SQL is much more simpler and elegant in terms of when compared to Mongo or Cassandra, and it solves our purpose, and we don't need the things that Mongo or Cassandra offers right now, right? So there is no point of going with that. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. So now redirection is simple. It will be just you will have some API expand / shorten code. So you will just simply find out in your DB the actual URL, and make a redirection call to it, right? So there is no science in it. So guys, I think that's pretty much it for designing the API URLs as well. Do you guys have any questions about it? Cool. So I'll quickly draw the diagram of this that captures all of the components that we have identified in our system. So this thing is the one we have is API gateway. A request will come here, it will serve the response. Inside we will have shorten service. So guys, these are some ways of diagramming it, which you can learn. So this basically these three boxes indicate that there are multiple boxes on which this shorten service is running. I hope you get an idea. Yeah, multiple machines. So machines are often referred as boxes. Yeah. So another service that you have is your KGS system. So this shortening service will have a request, it will call KGS. It will have its own DB. It will write to it. KGS will be having some Redis where it will store generated identifiers, and then there will be one there will be another component which is KGS job. This job will basically essentially this job will generate the your unique IDs and store them in Redis. IDs. So once you have this so guys, all of you might be wondering, there is no load balancer in this. So to answer that, this API gateway, now there are actually, once you create these multiple boxes for representing a service, shorten service, it essentially means that shorten service is behind a load balancer. How else would you serve the request from multiple boxes otherwise, right? Yeah, sure, go on. Yeah, sure. So basically, I think I didn't explicitly mention that while we were figuring out how exactly we will be generating the identifiers. Yeah, so there are basically this KGS job will be part of this KGS system itself. So what this KGS job will do, it will generate the identifiers. It will check whether they have been already used or not. If not used, then it will keep populating them to Redis. So that's the just job of KGS. It will generate identifiers, and this KGS service, it will just respond with the for one request. It's like the API of KGS will look something like this: get ID or generate ID, and it will just pop one shortcode from Redis and it will return that. That's the only job of KGS service. KGS job is what it will exactly keep running in periodically in intervals. It will keep generating the identifiers and keep populating them to Redis, so that KGS service can utilize them. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And yeah, it's a it's a piece of code. Yeah. Any other question, guys? Okay, so guys, yeah, go on. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is a job. Yeah, cron job, or you can think of it as a cron job or something like that. Uh-huh. Okay. Mm-hmm. No, no. So basically, what we will do, this we will have some component that knows how to generate an identifier and without collision. Basically, that component will essentially take care of looking up the DB. So in case there are no identifiers left in the Redis, what you can do, you can invoke that part of a system to generate the ID and just return it from there. So theoretically, practically, what we will do, since we have already estimated our rate, right, that we are creating 200 URLs, 200 URLs per second, right? So you essentially need to generate more than this, right? So you can configure this job such that it basically it generates 200 URLs, like 300 URLs, say 300 URLs, puts them in Redis and then goes on a slip. And this job can then monitor the size of a Redis. What is it right now? And based on so it will run continuously, but it will only perform the the part of ID generation only if there are lesser than 200 IDs in Redis. Or you can keep some threshold. Say you never want your Redis to shrink below, say, 10,000 IDs. There should always you will always maintain 10,000 identifiers in your Redis. So in that case, you will never starve for the identifier. So guys, the last part. Bottlenecks. So guys, what are the bottlenecks in our system right now? Okay, so guys, for addressing the bottlenecks, there could be two types of interviewers which you can get. So for example, when you are here, you are designing how you will be serving this API, and you suggested this thing that you will generating a counter. So some interviewers can prompt you there itself, and they will highlight you the issue that counters will produce, that auto increment counters will produce. Another set of interviewers, what they will do, they will let you proceed and identify the and discuss the problems at the end. So now we have followed the first approach. We have discussed the problems, all the problems then and there itself. So so these were the some bottlenecks which were there in our system, but we have addressed them right at the spot, because this was kind of a mentoring session, not the real interview. In real interview, you are not going to have all of these things upfront, right? In real interview, you might just know the counter approach, or you might think of just that approach. So you will just suggest that and move ahead. And in the later in bottleneck resolution phase, you can mention all of these things to the interviewer that these things can cause a problem, right? So this was one problem that we had in our system, which we had resolved while designing itself. Any other concerns that you are seeing in our system currently? So guys, do you think it's a perfect system? Okay. Okay, so guys, one more improvement that we can make over here is that this shortened service, there are two parts of it. One is read and another one is redirection. Since we have assumed that our read-write ratio is 1:100, right? So it's a good idea to cache the URLs, basically frequently accessed URLs, right? So that you don't have to perform a DB lookup every time there is a request, because this number 20k RPS, 20k redirection request per second, this number 20k is not a small number. You will be essentially making 20k hits to the DB. So what you can essentially do, you can store some top 2 million or 5 million or 10 million URLs in the cache. And if the the redirection request comes for those shortened codes, you can simply first check in the cache. If URL, the expanded URL is there in the cache, you can simply return from there. If URL is not there in the cache, you can then look up the DB and then return this response. Does that make sense, guys? So we will be having one cache over here. I am drawing it here itself, since we don't have a space. Yeah, so I think, guys, that's pretty much it from my side for sake of this problem. So if you guys have any questions, then you can feel free to ask me. Yeah, sure. Okay, go on. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Okay. By designing, you mean coding it, right? Yeah. So this is the myth that we need to address. Okay. So इसमें when you are facing this kind of interviews, you have to be very quick and proactive in making the decisions. And one thing, mark my words for this, you can never have 100% correct design upfront. There will always be some gaps which you will realize when you will jump to actual implementations, but that percentage should be small. So what you should do, basically, what in this kind of interviews, what do I mean by what do I exactly mean by you have to be quick in taking the decisions. So whenever people code, they spend lot of times in structuring whether I should create this class or not, whether I should whether I can like enclose this functionality in a particular class, or I should put it separately, right? All those low level decisions that you have to make, you have to be very quick about them, because coming up with the solution, coming up with the poorly designed code in terms of low level is better than no implementation at all. So first thing, you should be very cognizant about it. You should go, if you just focus on implementation first, you will have some enough time at the end to restructure your code and in following more better object oriented design style. So, but you have to first get the correct things in first place. You cannot just keep thinking about those small things while making the decisions. You have to give some thoughts to it, but you don't have to get stuck over there. Yeah. 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 So all of these things, you don't have to spend much time on it. So for example, and you should be for whichever language you code in, So for example, you code in Java. So you should be master of standard structure that is followed in that language. For example, if someone asks me to design certain API in Java, I will start from creating handler, then I will create one manager, which will be essentially facade pattern. Then I will be having some kind of DAO layers. I can have some caching layers on top of it. So this is my rough structure which I will follow blindly if someone asks me to design an API, because I primarily code in earlier I used to code in Java, now I code in Node and Golang. So for Golang I have some different structure in mind. So if anyone asks me to design, I'll immediately jump to that structure. That structure you should be so much familiar with it that you can write it with your by closing your eyes. And once this bigger structure is in the right place, then restructuring the small components is not going to take you much time. But if you mess up structuring the bigger component itself, then I think you will take it lot more time to restructure small components, since lot of restructuring small components will require you to again think about the bigger components. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah. 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 Because there are two types of LLD interview. One is in which you have to just talk about the classes, and another one is in which you have to show the working code, right? The people who expect you to show the working code, they are not going to settle with your talks. Whatever fancy thing you talk about, they don't care. They just want to see the working code, but with the decent structuring. But when you have to talk about it, you have to just talk, big high-fi fancy words. I'll use strategy, I'll use decorator, I'll use factory pattern, I'll use facade and all of these things. But when you go actually writing about when it is actually about writing the code, you have to be very quick about it. Yeah. Okay. In Java. No. If you code up everything in a single class, then anyway you are going to get rejected. Okay. No. Don't do this. Basically, it will make your code less readable for the interviewer. Basically, how he will identify what are all the classes are there. So if you don't overthink, then it takes hardly few seconds. It's a problem only when you overthink that what are the packages you are going to create, where should I put this class. You don't have to give much thoughts to those things in this kind of interviews. This kind of interviews are all about speed. So guys, I think that's all from my side. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session. Yeah, so see you guys next week. I think we may have another session. I'll share on LinkedIn if we choose to organize. So guys, I think that's all for today. See you guys in the next one if you have one, or you guys can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn for any kind of questions or queries that you have. Yeah. See you guys. Bye bye. Have a great day.